Karen wanted me gone. The judge made sure she stayed away. The morning they called 911 on me, I was holding a hammer over the cabin I'd inherited on my own riverfront. Never imagined I'd be treated like a trespasser on my family's land. Sheriff cars rolled in, HOA papers flew, and suddenly I had to prove I wasn't squatting on what's legally mine. Stick with me, this one unravels fast. If you've ever stood your ground against folks who overstepped, drop a comment and hit subscribe. These real HOA battles get wilder every week. I was halfway through setting the ridge beam when the world snapped in half. First came the distant echo of engines on gravel, then the hard strobe of red and blue lights bouncing off the fresh-cut timber of my cabin frame. For a split second, I just stood there on the ladder, hammer lifted mid-swing, trying to understand why 3 sheriff cruisers were barreling down my private access road like they were responding to an armed standoff. Nothing in this quiet stretch of Montana ever came in hot. Not unless a wildfire jumped the canyon. Not unless someone died. I stepped down slowly, boots grinding into the sandy riverbank. My half-built cabin sat right at the bend, my grandfather's bend. 40 acres of riverfront deeded to our family, when this valley was nothing but elk trails and logging roads. This was supposed to be the morning I finished the rafters. Instead, dust swirled behind the patrol cars as they slid to a stop, doors cracking open in near unison. Sheriff Morales was the first out. He kept his hand near his belt, eyes scanning the site like he expected someone to jump from behind a stack of lumber. His deputies followed his steps, moving with a caution that made no sense at all. I raised both hands slightly, not in surrender, but in confusion. "Morning, Sheriff," I said, voice even. "Something wrong?" Before Morales could answer, a shrill voice cut the air in half. "There!" Bethany Crowell stormed past the cruisers like she owned them, heels stabbing into the dirt, face tight with the kind of righteous fury only an HOA president can muster. She jabbed her finger toward me as if presenting evidence to a jury. "That's the squatter I told you about. He's illegally building on Maple Ridge HOA watershed land." I let out a short breath. Not a laugh, not yet, but damn close. Squatter. On land that had been in my family since 1932. She was unbelievable. The deputies stiffened, and that was when the tension finally hit me. Not fear, but the kind of cold disbelief that crawls up the spine. She had actually called 911. She had actually convinced law enforcement to show up armed and ready because she didn't like the sight of a cabin frame 20 yards from a river she didn't own. Morales approached carefully, but I could tell he wasn't convinced of anything yet. "Sir," he said, tone controlled, "we received a report of unauthorized occupation and construction on protected HOA property. I'm going to need to see some ID and whatever permits or documents you've got." Bethany folded her arms, satisfied. The deputies watched me like they expected me to bolt. I reached slowly into my pocket and pulled out my wallet, then my folder. I'd been carrying that folder everywhere for weeks. Not because I thought something like this would happen, but because Bethany had been hovering around my land since the day I broke ground. She'd shown up twice already, demanding to inspect my project, shoving printouts of HOA bylaws in my face as if they applied to land miles outside their jurisdiction. I handed Morales my license first, then the folder. "Sheriff," I said calmly, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is my property." Bethany barked out a laugh. "Oh, please. He thinks he can fool law enforcement with made-up paperwork. The entire riverbank is controlled by Maple Ridge HOA. This man is trespassing and constructing without board approval." I turned toward her. "Bethany, this land isn't yours. It never has been." She smirked like I'd said the funniest thing in the world. Morales opened the folder and began flipping through the contents. Deed, boundary survey, riparian rights certificate, water access filings. The original federal map stamped with a surveyor's mark older than any house in Maple Ridge. The sheriff's eyebrows climbed. Bethany's confidence flickered, but she kept her posture tall, refusing to break. I watched Morales read in silence, the river whispering behind us. The entire moment stretched thin, confusion, then skepticism, then something else forming in the sheriff's expression. Recognition. Maybe even amusement. He turned back toward Bethany, but he didn't speak yet. He closed the folder very slowly, like someone collecting their thoughts before dropping a hammer on the wrong person. A knot formed in my gut. Not fear for myself, but anticipation of whatever storm was about to break over Bethany's head. All I'd wanted was a sunrise morning and a roof beam. Instead, I stood between 3 police cruisers, a hostile HOA president, and a sheriff deciding which one of us had just wasted his time. And the question burned through me. Why did the HOA call 911 on the man who inherited the riverfront? Sheriff Morales held the folder at his side, the tension so tight it felt like the air itself was waiting to break. Behind him, Bethany's heels scraped impatiently in the gravel as she stepped forward, chin high, eyes bright with the kind of confidence only paperwork ignorance could produce. "Sheriff," she said sharply, "before you go believing whatever he printed at home, I have the official HOA documentation right here." She produced a rolled stack of papers secured with a gold HOA ribbon, Maple Ridge's favorite form of intimidation. Morales didn't take them yet. Instead, he looked at me, at the river, then at the cabin frame, as if trying to connect dots that weren't lining up the way Bethany wanted them to. I finally answered the question, burning through me since the sirens hit my shoreline. "Sheriff, why exactly did the HOA call 911 for a land ownership dispute? That isn't a criminal matter." Bethany cut in before Morales could speak. "Because he's not disputing ownership. He's committing a crime. He trespassed onto restricted HOA watershed land and started constructing a building without board approval. That is illegal under Maple Ridge regulations." I stared at her. "Maple Ridge regulations don't apply to land you don't own." Her eyes flashed. "That's what you think." Finally, Morales exhaled and opened her packet. The deputies shifted, watching his reaction closely. I could see the first flicker of doubt on his face as he studied the map, then confusion. He turned the page, then another. Every map Bethany brought showed the riverbank wrapped neatly inside Maple Ridge's boundary. But those lines were all wrong. "Sheriff," I said carefully, "those aren't county maps. Those aren't even state survey maps. Those are HOA diagrams. They're not legally recognized." Bethany scoffed. "Our HOA maps are the official maps used for property allocation and resource management. We manage everything from the ridge trail to the river access." I felt a cold spark of anger. She wasn't confused. She was doubling down. And from Morales's expression, she had done this often enough that her voice carried weight, even when it shouldn't. "Let me see those," I said. "No." Her grip tightened around the documents. "You don't get to touch official HOA property." I took a step closer. "You're claiming my family's riverfront based on a map you printed from a boardroom." Morales raised a hand, stopping us both. He pulled out the old county boundary survey from my folder, the one stamped and signed from 1932. Hand-drawn by federal surveyors mapping riparian rights long before Maple Ridge existed. Most people see a deed and call it a day. But a riparian rights document? That speaks louder than any HOA bylaw. The sheriff held my survey next to Bethany's HOA map. Same valley, same river, completely different boundaries. "Ma'am," Morales said slowly, "these maps don't match." Bethany stepped closer. "They do match. His is outdated, ancient even. Ours is updated to reflect watershed access granted to Maple Ridge." I shook my head. Watershed access isn't the same as land ownership, and you can't change boundaries without a court order. Bethany tossed her hair and smiled like she was lecturing a child. We didn't need a court order. The previous board approved the updated layout unanimously. Morales blinked. HOA boards don't have the authority to redraw land boundaries. Her smile faltered. I pressed, feeling the shift. Sheriff, ask her who submitted the map update to the county office. Bethany's face went tight. We didn't need to. There it is, I murmured. A non-filed, non-legal HOA fantasy map. She turned on me, furious. You don't get to talk to me like that. This riverbank is part of Maple Ridge jurisdiction, and you are trespassing. I watched her, watched the way she clung to her version of reality, as if the truth itself were an insult. This wasn't ignorance. It was entitlement wearing the mask of authority. Morales rubbed his temple. Ma'am, do you have any official county or state documents proving Maple Ridge owns this land? Bethany hesitated for the first time. Then quietly, our board agreed the HOA should manage all water access. Manage, I repeated. Not own, not control, not seize. The sheriff's gaze hardened, the shift unmistakable. Ma'am, managing a space is not the same as owning it. These documents, he lifted my survey and deed, predate your HOA by several decades. Bethany's voice sharpened. You're making a mistake. You don't understand how things work in Maple Ridge? I understand jurisdiction, Morales replied. And I understand boundaries. Behind him, one deputy whispered to another, This again. Like this wasn't the first time an HOA president had pulled something like this. Bethany saw the tide turning and doubled down. Sheriff, you need to remove him, now! Her desperation was showing, tight jaw, trembling hand on her packet, voice cracking under pressure. Morales didn't move. I haven't made that determination yet. I stepped forward, keeping my voice steady. Sheriff, my deed is legitimate. My grandfather owned this riverfront before any HOA existed. And those altered HOA maps, they're not legal. Bethany flinched at the word altered. That was the crack. And once you see a crack in someone like her, you know a whole wall is about to come down. Morales lifted the deed again, weighing it like a verdict. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. Something was fundamentally wrong with the HOA's claim. And Bethany knew it. She knew it so deeply that she refused to let Morales finish reading the evidence that proved her wrong. Her entire authority depended on people not questioning her, but he was questioning her now. The river hummed behind us while Bethany's certainty drained inch by inch. Her voice dropped, brittle as dry grass. Sheriff, those old documents shouldn't matter anymore. Morales stared at her. The law disagrees. Silence settled between us, thick and decisive. And in that silence, one thing became clear. Bethany didn't just misunderstand the boundary. She had been using altered HOA maps to claim land that wasn't hers, and now the sheriff had seen them. But what I didn't know yet was how far those altered maps were about to reach, or how deep the lie went inside Maple Ridge. For the next several days, the tone around my cabin shifted. Not quieter, not calmer, just meaner. The sirens didn't return, but the HOA sure did. Not with police this time, but with paper. Lots of paper. The first notice appeared on my generator in a plastic sleeve. Cease construction. Violation of HOA Environmental Code 414.2. I peeled it off and tossed it in the burn barrel. 2 hours later, another one was taped to my solar array. By sundown, 3 more were stuck to my lumber stack, my sawhorse, and even my truck windshield. None of them were legally binding. Every single one carried the Maple Ridge HOA logo, and nothing else. No county signature, no jurisdiction line, not even a real enforcement code, Just threats printed on fancy letterhead. Stakes were shifting, and I could feel it. This wasn't about land management anymore. It was about control. Bethany had tasted authority for so long that she couldn't stand watching it slip away. By day 3, her harassment evolved again. I caught movement past the cottonwoods. 3 board members lined up at what they believed was the boundary. They stood there like sentries, arms crossed, snapping pictures every time I lifted a tool. One of them whispered to another, "Document everything. We'll bury him in violations." I walked toward them until they stiffened. "You're all trespassing," I said, voice flat. "We're conducting an HOA inspection," one replied, chin raised, trying to mimic Bethany's arrogance. "On land you don't own," I countered. "Step off my property." The tallest one, Ken, I think his name was, checked the ground beneath his boots as if the dirt might confirm his innocence. "This is HOA jurisdiction. Our maps say so." "Your maps are wrong," I said, "and the sheriff already knows it." That hit him. He faltered, lowered his phone, and the 3 of them retreated like spooked deer. But I knew it wasn't over. Because the next morning, the harassment escalated again. I was leveling the subfloor when I heard footsteps, fast, insistent, crunching over the gravel. I looked up to see Bethany marching straight into the foundation footprint, clipboard in hand. She didn't even pretend to stay at the edge this time. "Good morning, trespasser," she said. She started taking pictures, angles, close-ups, wide shots, like she was building a case only she believed in. "You're in my work zone," I said, "and you're trespassing again." She didn't stop. She didn't even look at me. "I'm documenting ongoing violations," she replied. "Noise complaints, structural hazards, visual obstruction of the river corridor, all of which are prohibited under Maple Ridge bylaws." I stepped into her path. "The nearest house is half a mile away." She finally met my eyes, and I saw something new there. Not confidence, not authority, but desperation wrapped tight in ego. "You think anyone cares about your interpretation of the rules?" she snapped. "I run Maple Ridge. My word is the standard." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "Your word isn't the law." Her jaw clenched so hard I heard the grit in her teeth. She took one last picture, then marched toward her golf cart. But before she climbed in, she said something that settled like a cold stone in my gut. "Enjoy your little rebellion, Jake, because I'm done playing nice. Our lawyers will handle this next." Her golf cart tore away, kicking dust into the morning. Lawyers, HOA lawyers. That wasn't a small threat. Not in Montana. Not when Maple Ridge's board members included retired corporate executives and wealthy homeowners with money to burn. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty hit me. If they actually retained counsel, even misinformed counsel, the situation could spiral before the truth had room to breathe. By noon, 2 more notices appeared. By evening, 3. By the next morning, 6. Every surface I touched had a new printed accusation attached to it. Unauthorized lumber storage, unauthorized energy system, unauthorized vehicle presence, unauthorized structure formation, unauthorized shoreline engagement, unauthorized, unauthorized, unauthorized. The harassment wasn't just annoying, it was strategic. Paper by paper, they were building a narrative. Jake Carter, rogue builder. Jake Carter, rule breaker. Jake Carter, violator of community standards. Bethany didn't need the law to be on her side. She needed people to believe it was. The stakes were becoming clear. If Maple Ridge shaped the perception early, I'd always be on defense. If I didn't counter their narrative with real documentation, real facts, real law, I could lose more than time. I could lose the river. But the deeper problem revealed itself that evening. As I was stacking lumber, I spotted Bethany again, But not alone this time. She brought a man, short, stocky, wearing a Maple Ridge polo shirt 2 sizes too tight, clipboard in hand. "This is our environmental compliance officer," she announced loudly, as if the squirrels needed to hear. "He's here to assess damage you've caused to the shoreline." The man nodded solemnly. "Serious environmental infractions. Serious consequences." I raised an eyebrow. "What's your name?" He blinked. "Evan." "And your environmental qualifications?" He froze. Bethany stepped between us like a shield. "He's certified by the HOA board," she said. Of course he was. She wasn't bringing in lawyers. She was manufacturing authority. I pulled out my phone, recording now. "Evan, are you aware you're conducting an inspection on non-HOA land?" He looked to Bethany, who hissed, "Don't answer that." But her fear said enough. The lie was cracking, and she knew it. Still, she kept pushing. The next morning, the breaking point came. Someone, Bethany or her board, had hammered new signs into the ground near my driveway. Private property. Maple Ridge HOA, no unauthorized entry HOA watershed, permit required. Seeing those signs on my land flipped a switch inside me. This wasn't just harassment. It was attempted ownership. The stakes escalated from nuisance to threat. And that was when a line formed in my mind, sharp as a blade. If Bethany thought fake maps and fake officers could steal my river, she was about to learn what real documentation looks like. I went back to the cabin, grabbed the leather folder, and set it beside my tools. From now on, I carried it with me everywhere, because if Maple Ridge wanted a fight over ownership, I would end it with the one thing Bethany couldn't falsify: the truth. By the 4th morning, I could feel the conflict tightening around the river like a cinched rope. Fake notices weren't slowing me down. So Bethany escalated again. She didn't come alone this time. She brought half the HOA board. I heard their voices before I saw them, clustered near the new fence markers like vultures around a carcass. "There he is," one of them muttered. "Get everything on video." I stepped out from behind the cabin frame, the leather folder tucked under my arm. Their phones came up instantly. Bethany strode forward, chin lifted in practiced superiority. "This ends today," she declared. "You've ignored every notice we've given you, and you continue to trespass on Maple Ridge watershed land. I've already prepared the complaint for our lawyers." The board murmured approval, relieved someone else was doing their thinking. I kept my voice controlled. "Bethany, this is my family's property. Your claims aren't legal." She thrust her clipboard toward me. "So, this map proves otherwise." It was the same altered HOA boundary diagram she'd flaunted in front of the sheriff. Except this time, someone had thickened the boundary lines with a marker, as if bold ink could rewrite reality. I set my folder on a stack of lumber and opened it deliberately. The rustle of old paper caught their attention. "You're going to want to see this before you make any more accusations," Bethany scoffed. "We don't need your homemade paperwork." "This isn't homemade." I pulled out the 1932 riparian rights certificate. The original, stamped in ink so faded it was almost ghost-like. But the federal seal was unmistakable. The signature of the surveyor was unmistakable. The map attached was unmistakable. "This," I said clearly, "is the original federal survey defining Clearwater River riparian boundaries. It lists my grandfather, Samuel Carter, as the sole owner of 5 miles of riverfront, including," I paused, letting their anticipation sharpen, "everything you're standing on." The board members stopped recording. One lowered his phone. Another leaned forward, eyes narrowing at the historic document as though history itself had betrayed them. Bethany didn't blink. "That's meaningless. This is outdated. Our HOA controls river access." "Control doesn't mean ownership," I said. "And you can't override federal riparian rights with a homeowners association vote." Her lips thinned. "Property lines change over time." "Not without a judge's signature," I replied. Do you have one? Her silence was immediate and telling. One board member, an older man with nervous eyes, stepped closer, staring between her map and my deed. Bethany, does the county have this updated version? He asked, waving her HOA diagram. Her voice sharpened. It doesn't matter whether they do. It matters a lot, I cut in. Because using unofficial boundary maps to enforce HOA authority on land you don't own is illegal. The older man swallowed. His allegiance was shifting. But Bethany wasn't done. She lunged forward and snatched at my folder. Give me that. I stepped back. Touch this again, and it becomes evidence of tampering. That word, evidence, froze her. So I opened the deed fully and held it out where everyone could see the signatures, the dates, the notary stamps older than Maple Ridge itself. This is why your maps don't match, I said, because your maps were altered to look like you control this riverbank. But the law says otherwise. The man beside her exhaled sharply. Bethany, did you alter the maps? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence was an admission. The tension snapped. You've led thousands of dollars in HOA projects on land we don't own, someone blurted. You said we were responsible for watershed upkeep, another added, voice cracking with betrayal. Bethany raised a trembling finger. Don't turn on me. The board approved those decisions. They didn't deny it, but they didn't defend her either. I pressed in, sensing the fracture widening. And now you're threatening legal action against someone who actually owns the land. Sheriff Morales saw the real documents. You're losing footing, Bethany. Her eyes flicked toward the access road, as if expecting reinforcements. None came. Instead, she leaned forward, voice dropping into something darker. You think a stack of dusty papers scares us? I'm calling the real authorities. You mean the same ones who already saw my deed? I asked. That landed. Hard. The board members exchanged glances, fear creeping in. If the sheriff had seen the documents, and Bethany continued pushing invalid claims, it could become a criminal issue very quickly. But rather than backing down, she doubled down. You're interfering with HOA operations. That's grounds for removal. I almost laughed. I'm not a member of your HOA. You have no jurisdiction over me. She didn't respond. She couldn't. The truth pinned her in place. Beside her, the older board member whispered, We need to pause this. We need to speak with counsel. This may not be HOA land. Bethany whipped around. Of course it's HOA land. Look at the map. The older man held up my deed. Look at this. Moments like that changed the temperature of a conflict. The balance shifted from me versus the HOA to me versus Bethany, with the board caught in between, no longer sure which side they should be on. I picked up my folder, brushing sawdust from the leather. If you want a real conversation, bring actual legal documents, not board sketches. Bethany glared daggers at me. You haven't heard the last of this. Then she stormed off, her board trailing behind her like fractured shadows, confused, shaken, unsure whom to believe anymore. But as the last of them disappeared up the trail, I realized something. The lie wasn't just on her map. It was inside her board, inside the whole HOA. They'd been operating under false boundaries for years, boundaries that gave them power they didn't rightfully have. And now, with every word spoken today, the ground beneath her authority had begun to crack wide open. The question wasn't whether she would strike back. The question was how. And the answer came the very next morning, with the wail of more sirens roaring down my private road for the second time in a week. I stood at the edge of the cabin frame, hammer still in hand, and watched 3 sheriff cruisers descend the slope again. Same boots hitting the gravel, same radios crackling, same tension rolling off them like static. Except this time, the lead cruiser didn't stop 20 feet out. It came all the way up the embankment, close enough that its tires sank into the sand beside my lumber stack. Sheriff Morales stepped out immediately, faster than before, and that alone told me everything. Bethany had escalated her claim. Behind him, 2 deputies emerged with that stiff posture they use when responding to a call labeled urgent by someone who has no business filing urgent calls. And sure enough, there she was, Bethany Crowell, storming out of a black SUV she definitely didn't own yesterday, her face flushed with righteous fury and something else this time. Panic. She jabbed a shaking finger at me. "That's him, Sheriff. He's destroying protected shoreline. We need him removed before irreversible damage is done." She dropped a fat stack of papers at Morales' feet, as if presenting evidence to the Supreme Court. The sheriff picked up the stack, thumbed through the pages, and frowned deeper with each sheet. Color-coded HOA diagrams, lists of imaginary violations, photographs of my cabin frame printed on glossy paper, and something new. A report claiming I'd altered the natural riverbank. That one almost made me laugh. I hadn't touched the riverbank, but the accusation wasn't meant to be true. It was meant to be loud. I met Morales' eyes. "Sheriff, she's escalating false claims. Nothing here is legal." Bethany spun toward him. "He's illegally altering watershed topography. Section 18 of our environmental code requires board approval for any structure within 200 feet of the river." "Your code," I said, stepping forward, "doesn't outrank federal riparian rights." Morales held up a hand, gesturing for quiet. "Let's see the documents." I walked to my workbench, grabbed the leather folder, and handed it over. He opened it with the same slow, methodical care I'd seen before. But this time, he took longer. He wasn't just reviewing, he was preparing to make a decision. Bethany hovered behind him, breathing down his neck. "Sheriff, please, those papers were debunked already by our board." He cut her off without raising his voice. "Ma'am, your board has no authority to debunk a federal document." She froze. He lifted the 1932 survey again, holding it against the morning light. His deputies stepped closer to study it. One muttered, "Damn, this thing's older than any of us." "It's also binding," I added. Morales nodded, flipping to the page showing the riverside boundary line, the line that placed me well within my rights and placed Maple Ridge nowhere near the river. Then he looked at Bethany. Really looked at her. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "you've filed an emergency call claiming this man was destroying protected HOA land." "He is," she snapped. "He's building on his own land," Morales replied. "Land proven to be owned by his family for nearly a century." Bethany's face drained of color, then flushed again in a violent red. "But the HOA has maintained that shoreline for years. We've delivered sand. We've installed benches. We've set rules. We've maintained," I said quietly, "on land you never verified you owned." "It's fraudulent," one deputy added, flipping through her printed complaint. "These reports reference ordinances that don't exist outside your HOA handbook." Bethany stepped backward, her confidence fraying. "Sheriff, you're making a mistake. You don't understand the importance of our community guidelines. I understand the law," he said. The weight of his voice silenced everyone. Then he turned to me. "Mr. Carter, to your knowledge, have you done anything that would alter the riverbank or violate environmental regulation?" "No," I said. "I haven't touched the river. My work is on already graded land." Morales nodded once. "That tracks with what I see here. And with this," he tapped the federal map, "you have the right to build a structure on your own property unless restricted by county code. Nothing in county code prohibits this." Bethany stepped forward as if she might physically block his words. "Remove him. Arrest him. He's defying HOA orders." "HOA orders," Morales replied. "Do not apply to him." Her mouth opened, closed, opened again, searching for an argument that no longer existed. But then, "Sheriff, Maple Ridge residents rely on that shoreline," she said, voice cracking. "They've used it for years. You can't just take that away." "I'm not taking anything away," he said. "It was never yours." Silence. A long, brittle silence broken only by the low hum of the river. Bethany's hands shook. "You're siding with him because he has old papers. Papers anyone can forge." "I verified the surveyor's seal," Morales said. "It's legitimate." Her last defense collapsed, but the deputies weren't done. One stepped forward. "Sheriff, do we need to issue a warning regarding false reporting?" Morales sighed. "Yes, we do." He faced Bethany with the sober patience of a parent dealing with a child caught lying twice in the same hour. "Ma'am, you filed a knowingly false emergency complaint. That's a misdemeanor in this county. I won't charge you today, but if this happens again, I will." Her jaw dropped. "You're threatening me?" "I'm informing you," he said. "Stay off Mr. Carter's property. Stop posting unauthorized notices. Stop interfering with his construction." I watched her slowly crumble. Rage, disbelief, humiliation twisting together like a storm she couldn't contain. The sheriff handed my documents back with a firm nod. "You're within your rights, Mr. Carter. Build your cabin. If the HOA has concerns, they need to take it up with the county, not with you." The cruisers started their engines. Deputies returned to their seats. But before Morales left, he leaned out his window. "Jake," he said, voice low enough only I could hear, "you might want to prepare. When folks build their identity on authority they never really had, they tend to come back swinging." I nodded. I figured. He drove off. Bethany stayed behind for a moment, alone, shrinking in the dust kicked up by the cruisers, before climbing into her SUV and speeding away. The riverbank was quiet again. But it wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet. It was the quiet before someone makes their next move. And from the look in her eyes when she drove off, I knew Bethany wasn't done, not even close. I hoped I would at least get a few hours of quiet to work on the cabin frame. But the thing about people like Bethany is that humiliation doesn't slow them down. It accelerates them. And when someone who thrives on control starts losing it, their next move is almost always bigger, louder, and far more reckless. By late afternoon, signs of her counterattack began to ripple through the valley. It started with the sudden silence from Maple Ridge. Normally, the HOA board buzzed around like flies, golf carts humming up and down the ridge trail, people recording every little thing I did, residents gathering at the community gate whispering about the cabin guy. But that day, nothing. Not a single board member on the boundary. Not a single notice taped to my truck. Not a single golf cart near the trail. It wasn't peace, it was strategy. The kind where a group retreats just long enough to build a bigger strike. And the strike arrived the following morning, not on wheels or hooves, but in voices, raised, angry, echoing down the riverbank. I stepped out of the cabin frame and saw them. 3 Maple Ridge residents standing near the fence line, pointing, pacing, gesturing wildly. A 4th joined them, waving what looked like a newsletter. They were arguing, loudly. Told us the HOA owned this beach. She said usage equals ownership. 20 years we've been picnicking on land that wasn't even ours? I approached slowly. The group turned, startled, but not hostile. One of them, a tall man in a fishing vest, spoke first. "You the owner of this land?" "I am." He let out a breath that was half relief, half embarrassment. "Listen, folks in Maple Ridge are freaking out. Word's spreading that the HOA never owned this shoreline, that we've been trespassing for years. Is that true?" I nodded. Yes. The sheriff confirmed it. The man dragged a hand down his face. Damn. Bethany said you forged documents. Then you're welcome to take a look for yourself, I said. They're real. He hesitated. The others waited behind him, uncertain whether they should stay or scatter. Look, he said, I don't want trouble. None of us do. But Bethany is calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight. She's telling everyone she's going to fix the boundary issue once and for all. A cold weight settled in my chest. Fix was not a word you wanted to hear from someone who had already altered maps. What is she planning? I asked. He shrugged helplessly. Don't know, but she's telling everyone the sheriff didn't have enough context. She says she'll present evidence tonight to prove Maple Ridge controls the river. The others nodded nervously. She told us the HOA is going to reclaim the shoreline, another resident added. Whatever that means. I thanked them and sent them on their way, but their words stayed with me long after they disappeared up the trail. Reclaim the shoreline. The phrase rattled around my mind with the weight of something dangerous. By noon, I received confirmation of just how dangerous. I was fastening joists when the familiar crunch of tires approached. Only this time, it wasn't a sheriff cruiser. It was my neighbor Tom, old rancher, lived at the very edge of Maple Ridge, watched this whole mess unfold from the sidelines. He pulled up in his beat-up pickup, window down. You hear the latest? He asked. Probably not, I said. What's she doing now? Tom spit a sunflower seed out the window. Heard from a board member, Bethany's planning to reveal a new map tonight. Claims she found updated documentation proving Maple Ridge owns every foot of shoreline from the ridge trail to the river bend. My jaw tightened. She can't create ownership out of thin air. That ain't stopping her, Tom replied. She's rallying folks, telling them you're trying to steal the beach they paid HOA dues to maintain. I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the truth settle. This wasn't just about the boundary anymore. This was about the narrative. And if she controlled the narrative, she controlled the crowd. Thanks, Tom, I said. I appreciate the heads up. He leaned out the window a little farther. Be ready, Jake. Tonight's meeting won't be quiet. Folks are angry, confused, and Bethany's stoking it like wildfire. He drove off, leaving me standing there with sawdust on my shirt and a knot forming in my stomach. I set my tools down and opened the leather folder on my workbench. I laid everything out carefully. The deed, the 1932 survey, the riparian rights certificate, the water access registration, the notarized county filings, and the map with the federal seal. If this was going to escalate into a public showdown, I needed to be ready. I wasn't going to attend the HOA meeting. Maple Ridge wasn't my HOA, and I wasn't legally obligated to show up. But I had a strong feeling the fallout would reach me, whether I went or not. Evening arrived slowly. The river turned darker, the shadows longer. I kept working, pounding nails, measuring cuts, pretending the tension wasn't tightening around the valley. But then, a voice. Tom again, hiking down the trail fast, breathing hard. You're going to want to hear this, he said. The meeting's gone off the rails. What happened? They're calling for a vote of no confidence. Half the community is furious. The board's split. Folks are demanding to know why she never checked the county records before using their dues on land she didn't own. That piece hit hard. This is collapsing on her, I said. Not fast enough, Tom replied. She's blaming everyone but herself. Says the county lost the real boundary records. Says you forged your documents. Says you manipulated the sheriff. I shook my head. She's unraveling. Worse, Tom added. She brought out that altered map again. The one she showed the sheriff. She's calling it the true record. Residents are yelling, demanding proof. It's chaos in there. The stakes crystallized. If she convinced them her map was real, they'd keep fighting me. If she didn't, they'd turn on her. Before I could respond, Tom lifted his hand and pointed toward the trail behind him. "Meeting ended with one decision," he said. "The biggest one yet." "What is it?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "The entire HOA board is marching down here to see your documents for themselves." I exhaled slowly. The river hummed below us, steady and ancient. A board confrontation wasn't what I wanted, but maybe it was exactly what needed to happen. "The truth wins," I said quietly. Tom smirked. "It does, but sometimes it needs help." He left me with that thought. And as the valley settled into night, I understood why this chapter of the fight mattered. The HOA had spent years shaping a false narrative, but tomorrow, the river itself would expose the truth. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear was long gone, but from the quiet certainty that the fight was shifting from paperwork and boundary lines into something larger, something public, something Bethany could no longer control with threats, printouts, or intimidation. By 9 a.m., I heard them before I saw them. Voices, dozens of them, trading sharp whispers and tense questions as they made their way down the ridge trail. The HOA board wasn't alone. At least 30 Maple Ridge residents marched behind them like they were on a field trip they hadn't agreed to attend. The inspection group stopped just past my boundary markers. Some looked angry, some embarrassed. Most just confused. At their front was Marcus Hale, the HOA vice president, khakis, investor smile, clipboard tucked under his arm like a prop he didn't believe in anymore. Behind him, Bethany hovered, jaw tight, arms folded across her chest like she expected to win by posture alone. Marcus approached me first. "Mr. Carter," he said, voice controlled, "the community asked the board to come review your ownership documents. There are concerns." "There should be," I said. "You've been misled." A murmur ran through the group. Bethany jumped in. "No one has been misled. He is attempting to seize public access shoreline. Our shoreline." "Your shoreline?" I pulled the leather folder from under my arm. "Funny. Let's straighten that out." I opened the survey map on a flat piece of plywood like I was laying out a crime scene. The moment the federal seal hit the sunlight, the crowd leaned in, curiosity replacing hostility. Even those who came angry stepped closer. "This," I said, tapping the faded lines, "is the original 1932 federal survey assigning riparian rights to my grandfather, Samuel Carter. It states, explicitly, the ownership of 5 continuous miles of riverfront." I drew my finger along the boundary line. "This entire stretch, from the ridge to the bend, is mine." A woman in yoga pants spoke loudly, voice shaking. "But we've used that beach for years. We were told the HOA owned it." "You were told," I repeated softly, "but you were never shown proof." The older man from the board, the same one who had questioned Bethany days earlier, stepped forward. "Bethany, can we see the county's version of your map? The official one?" Her expression locked up. "The county misplaced the records. I've told you this." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "We contacted the county last night. They said no records were lost." The crowd broke into frantic whispers. Bethany snapped, "Stop undermining me. I have the updated boundary map right here." She thrust her own papers into Marcus's hands. He unfolded them slowly, too slowly. His brow furrowed. His jaw tightened. "This isn't a county map," he said. "This isn't even a certified survey. This is—" He held it closer, frowning deeper. "A redrawn version of the HOA's expansion proposal, the one the Planning Commission rejected 5 years ago." A gasp shot through the group. Someone behind him shouted, "You lied to us?" Another voice, "We paid dues for land we never owned." A third, "Did you know this the entire time?" All eyes turned on Bethany, not with respect, not even with fear, but with betrayal. Real betrayal, the kind that cracks a community down the spine. She stammered, I updated the maps based on our intended jurisdiction. We needed to reflect future plans. Future plans don't erase existing deeds, I said. Marcus handed the disputed map back to her. Bethany, you altered official-looking documents to justify enforcement without checking county boundaries? Her face twitched, panic flickering beneath the rigid smile she always wore when she believed she was above the consequences. I did what was best for Maple Ridge, she snapped. Someone had to protect our property values. That's not protection, a resident fired back. That's fraud. The word hung heavy in the air. Fraud. And worse, everyone agreed with it. A resident stepped toward me, hands raised in apology. Mr. Carter, we didn't know. None of us knew. I believe you, I said, but the truth matters, and the truth is right here. I tapped the folder again. Your HOA president built her authority on a false map. Marcus turned to the board. We need a vote, now. Bethany's head snapped up. You can't vote without me. I'm the president. No, Marcus said firmly. You're the reason we have to. He addressed the crowd. All in favor of suspending Bethany Crowell as HOA president pending investigation of falsified boundary records? Every hand went up. Every single one. Except hers. She spun, eyes wide, lips trembling with disbelief. You're all making a mistake. You can't do this. I am Maple Ridge. Marcus looked at her with something close to pity. You were. The group turned away from her, surrounding my workbench again, now discussing the consequences, the legal implications, the embarrassment of having followed a leader who never verified the truth. Bethany stood alone. But as I watched her, something inside her shifted. Humiliation didn't break her. It hardened her. She looked at me, really looked, eyes glowing with a mix of hatred and desperation. This isn't over, she whispered. You stole something that belonged to this community, and I will take it back. No, I replied. You assumed something belonged to you, and the law disagreed. She shook her head violently. You think the law scares me? You haven't seen what I can do. She stormed up the path, not defeated, not retreating, but coiling for something reckless. Marcus approached me quietly. Jake, whatever line she just crossed inside her head, you need to be careful. People who lose their power this publicly, this humiliatingly, don't walk away from it. They try to reclaim it. I know, I said, because I saw it too. The way she burned after the vote, the way she clutched her altered map like a lifeline, the way her voice trembled, not with fear, but with resolve. And I understood instantly, her next move wouldn't be a meeting, a notice, or a false map. It would be something desperate, something stupid, something that could finally push this conflict into criminal territory. And I was right. Because that night, long after the board left and the talking died down and the river settled into darkness, my trail cameras caught headlights creeping toward the boundary line. Headlights that belonged to a luxury SUV. Headlights that stopped exactly where my new fence posts stood. Headlights that marked the moment Bethany crossed a line she could never come back from. The camera footage later showed the SUV inching forward like a predator stalking prey. The beams swept across the boundary markers I'd installed after the sheriff's second visit. Bright, reflective signs sunk into fresh soil to mark a line that should have ended all debate. But people like Bethany don't respect lines. They only see obstacles. At 2:07 a.m., the driver's door opened. Bethany stepped out. No clipboard this time. No HOA ribbon. No army of board members behind her. Just rage. She marched straight toward the fence posts, staring at them as if they were a personal insult delivered by the universe itself. Her shoulders were rigid, movements sharp, like someone seconds away from detonating. Then she did something I still struggle to believe. She went back to her SUV, got inside, and threw it into gear. The engine revved so hard it echoed off the river canyon. She aimed the vehicle at my fence and floored it. The first impact sent 2 posts tilting sideways. The second ripped a 10-foot section of wire loose. On the third pass, her bumper caught the tension wire and wrapped around it, and suddenly she wasn't driving anymore. She was being dragged. The SUV skidded, lurched, and spun off into the ditch before slamming nose first into a bank of river mud. The airbags blew out, filling the cabin in a cloud of white fabric. Then, silence, except for the distant hum of the engine still coughing through the damage. The camera timestamp read 2:14 a.m. I didn't find out until sunrise. When I checked my trail cameras, a habit I'd adopted thanks to her earlier trespassing, the footage nearly knocked the breath out of me. Not because of the damage, but because of the sheer recklessness. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. This wasn't entitlement. This was criminal. I called the sheriff immediately. 20 minutes later, Morales pulled up, tired eyes heavy with disbelief, as he watched the footage on my tablet. "She actually drove into your fence," he muttered, "at 2 a.m. "She didn't just drive into it," I said. "She tried to tear it out." He scrubbed a hand down his face. "Looks like destruction of property, trespassing, criminal mischief, reckless endangerment. Hell, maybe even filing a false emergency call if we tie it back." "She's unraveling," I added. "She's committing crimes," he corrected. We walked the boundary line together. The posts were splintered, wire stretched and twisted, tire ruts carved deep trenches through soil that hadn't been touched in decades. Then we saw the SUV. It was still there, nose down, hazard lights blinking weakly against the morning light. The airbags hung out the windows like deflated lungs. Bethany was gone. Either she walked home or someone came to get her. Morales exhaled heavily. "Get your camera out. I need full documentation." We photographed everything: the damage, the tire tracks, the point of impact, the boundary markers she'd uprooted. Every angle. Every detail. When we were done, Morales closed his notebook and gave me a look that told me he'd hit his limit. "Jake," he said, "I gave her 2 warnings. 2. She ignored both. I don't have a choice anymore." "You shouldn't," I replied. "Not after this." He nodded. "I'll prepare the charges. And Jake? She's not walking away with a slap on the wrist. This is serious." I appreciated that, but appreciation wasn't what I felt most. Relief, because finally, after weeks of harassment, lies, fake documents, false emergency calls, and intimidation, Bethany had done the one thing that ended all gray areas. She left evidence so undeniable that even her own board couldn't spin it. Before the sheriff left, he asked, "You want to file an official complaint?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Press every charge applicable." He nodded once. Firm. "Consider it done." News spread through Maple Ridge faster than wildfire. By noon, I heard the residents arguing from the ridge trail. Outrage, disbelief, apologies shouted into the air like confessions. Some blamed the board, some blamed themselves. Most blamed Bethany. Marcus arrived around 2, walking down the trail with the defeated posture of a man who'd just watched his entire professional reputation collapse. "Jake," he said, removing his sunglasses. "The board saw the footage. We're stunned." "Not as stunned as I was," I replied. He let out a humorless chuckle. "Fair. Listen, no one on the board knew she'd go this far. We thought she was exaggerating boundary confusion. We didn't know she falsified maps. And we damn sure didn't know she'd vandalize your property with a luxury vehicle. Yet you defended her, I said, not with accusation, but with clarity. You're right, he said. We did, and we were wrong. He cleared his throat, lowering his voice. The board voted this morning. She's officially removed from her position, permanently. I nodded. It was the right call, not justice, not yet, but the first consequence. Marcus continued, residents are furious. They're demanding transparency. They want to see the real boundary maps. They want to know how the HOA spent dues on beaches they didn't own. And the sheriff's charges, that's going to hit the community hard. She caused it, I said. He agreed. Jake, he added, I know you're not obligated, but would you be willing to show your documents during a community session? People need to understand what really happened. I'll consider it, I said. But right now, this needs to go through legal channels. I understand, he said. He turned to leave, then hesitated. One more thing. Bethany's been contacting residents privately. She's claiming she's the victim. Says you're framing her. Says the sheriff is biased. Does anyone believe her? Marcus shook his head. After last night? No. She burned every bridge she had. He left quietly, leaving only the river's steady hum behind him. Later that afternoon, the sheriff called. Jake, he said, court date is set. And the judge wants all video evidence, your deed, your survey, everything. We're moving fast. Good, I replied. This is one of the clearest cases of HOA overreach I've ever seen, Morales added. And with the vandalism footage, she doesn't stand a chance. I looked at the broken fence line, the ripped soil, the SUV still stuck like a monument to arrogance. No, I said softly. She doesn't. Because this wasn't a boundary dispute anymore. This was accountability. And the next step wasn't a meeting on a ridge trail. It was a courtroom, where the truth carried real consequences, and where Bethany Crowell would finally face all of hers. The courthouse and county seat wasn't big, just a square brick building with metal benches and one security scanner. But the tension inside felt larger than any courtroom I'd ever stepped into. People packed the rows, Maple Ridge homeowners, board members, curious locals, even a few reporters who'd heard whispers of an HOA president charged with destroying a fence in the middle of the night. Sheriff Morales met me by the front row. Jake, he said, offering a quick nod. Everything's in order. The judge has seen the evidence packet. I held the leather folder tight under my arm. I'd brought all of it. The deed, the 1932 survey, the riparian rights certificate, and printed screenshots from my trail cameras. But the real weight today wasn't the paperwork. It was the footage. Because once the judge saw exactly what Bethany had done, how she'd weaponized false claims, altered boundaries, and rammed her SUV into private property, there would be no spinning, no excuses, no misunderstandings. This was accountability under oath. A hush fell when the bailiff called out, Case of Carter versus Crowell. Parties, please approach. I stepped forward with my attorney, Sarah Whitfield, a land rights lawyer with a sharp mind and a voice that cut cleaner than any saw. She carried the evidence binder like it was a loaded tool. Bethany entered from the opposite door, wearing a blazer 2 sizes too formal for a rural courtroom. Her hair was immaculate, her chin lifted, her expression carved into brittle confidence. But her eyes darted across the crowd, taking in the residents who once cheered her name, now whispering behind raised hands. She was alone. The board, who once obeyed her like a general, stood behind me instead. Judge Harris read the charges calmly. Trespassing. Destruction of private property. Vandalism. Filing a false emergency report. Bethany straightened. Your Honor, I intend to prove that Mr. Carter fabricated evidence in order to— Stop, the judge said, raising a hand. We will examine the evidence in an orderly manner. Harris turned to Sarah. Ms. Whitfield, your opening statement. Sarah stepped forward. Your Honor, this case is clear-cut. The defendant, Ms. Crowell, repeatedly claimed ownership of land that legally belongs to my client. When challenged with legitimate documents, she escalated from harassment to criminal behavior, culminating in late-night vandalism of boundary markers and a recorded attempt to remove property using her vehicle. She paused, lifting the binder, all of which is supported by certified documents and video. The judge nodded. Proceed. The first exhibit was my deed. Bethany remained still, but her jaw tightened. The second was the 1932 survey, projected onto the courtroom screen. The crisp black boundary line cut across the valley like a knife, unmistakably placing all shoreline property on my side. Residents in the back whispered, their voices laced with shock. Next came the riparian rights certificate, stamped, notarized, undisputed. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Sarah clicked to play the trail camera footage. At 2:07 a.m., headlights washed across the frame. At 2:08, Bethany's silhouette emerged. At 2:09, the SUV rammed the first post. At 2:12, the wire wrapped around the bumper. At 2:14, the SUV skidded, lost control, and slammed into the ditch. There were gasps. A few people covered their mouths. Bethany stared straight ahead, face frozen in denial, fingers gripping the table so tightly her knuckles whitened. When the clip ended, Sarah let silence speak for a full 3 seconds before turning to the judge. Your Honor, this is not an interpretation. This is not a misunderstanding. This is a deliberate violation of law. Judge Harris adjusted his glasses. Ms. Crowell, do you wish to respond? Bethany stood slowly. For a moment I wondered if she would admit the truth, apologize, plead for leniency. She didn't. Your Honor, she said, voice thin but defiant, that fence was installed illegally. It obstructed the community's rightful access to the riverfront, property that Maple Ridge has maintained and used for decades. I acted to protect community resources. Harris blinked once. Ms. Crowell, do you possess any documentation that contradicts the plaintiff's deed or survey? She raised her chin. The HOA maps clearly show— HOA maps, he interrupted, are not legal boundary documents. Bethany hesitated, but she tried again. But the community, the judge said, leaning forward, was misled. A ripple moved through the gallery. He continued, you filed false emergency reports. You trespassed repeatedly. You damaged property that did not belong to you. And you nearly caused a serious accident by operating your vehicle recklessly. Her facade cracked. That fence shouldn't have been there. It was on his land, Harris said sharply. Land your HOA has never owned. She faltered. I was protecting our residents. The judge's voice dropped to a level that silenced the entire room. Ms. Crowell, you weren't protecting your community. You were protecting your ego. Her face fell, not from shame, but from the realization she'd lost the last inch of ground she'd been standing on. Judge Harris picked up his pen. Verdict as follows: guilty on all counts. Gasps again. A few audible yes finally murmured from the back. He continued, you are ordered to pay restitution for all property damage, a fine for filing a false emergency report, 200 hours of community service assigned by the county, and a restraining order. You are to remain no less than 500 feet from Mr. Carter's property at all times. Bethany's mouth trembled. 500 feet? But I live— That is the ruling, the judge said. Court adjourned. The gavel dropped with a final echoing crack. Bethany sank into her seat, shoulders collapsing inward. The once unshakable HOA president sat motionless, staring at nothing, surrounded by residents who no longer followed her, only pitied her. Sheriff Morales approached me with a firm handshake. "This is justice, Jake. Long overdue." Sarah closed the binder with satisfaction. "Congratulations," she whispered. "Truth won." But it wasn't victory I felt as I stepped into the sunlight outside the courthouse. It was closure. A long overdue end to a battle I never asked for, but refused to lose. And as Maple Ridge residents filed past me, offering apologies, handshakes, even invitations to community gatherings, I realized something else. The lie had finally died. The truth had finally prevailed. And for the first time since the day Bethany marched onto my land, with her fake maps and louder-than-sense confidence, the river felt peaceful again. But peace wasn't something that simply appeared. It had to be rebuilt. When the courthouse doors closed behind us, residents of Maple Ridge stood scattered across the steps, some silent, some shaken, others visibly relieved. The spell Bethany had cast over them for years had finally broken, cracked apart by evidence, law, and her own reckless decisions. No more threats, no more false notices, no more maps printed from whatever fantasy world she was living in. Sheriff Morales walked with me toward the parking lot. "You handled this better than most folks would have," he said. "Plenty would have shouted, fought back, escalated." "I didn't have to," I replied. "The truth did the work." He gave a small nod. "If every land dispute ended like this, my job would be easier." I shook his hand. "Thanks for stepping in when it mattered." "Hell," he said, tipping his hat. "It's what I'm here for." A week passed. Then two. The chaos that once defined Maple Ridge dissolved into polite knock-once visits and quiet apologies. Residents walked down the Ridge Trail, not to protest, not to record, not to demand access, but to talk. Really talk. The former HOA vice president, Marcus, visited with his hands in his pockets, humility replacing his once corporate confidence. "We're trying to rebuild the board from the ground up," he told me. "We're done pretending we control things that don't belong to us. Folks want transparency now, real oversight." "That's good," I said. "You'll run it better than she ever did." He chuckled. "Low bar, Jake." Some residents brought pies, bread, or handwritten notes. One of them, a man named Peterson, stood at the riverbank with me one morning. "If you ever want to hold a community event down here," he said hesitantly, "we'd be honored." The gesture surprised me. "I'll keep that in mind," I said. He nodded gratefully before heading back toward the ridge. The hostility that had once seeped out of Maple Ridge now turned into something else. Humility. Acceptance. A willingness to face the fact that they'd let one woman's ego lead an entire neighborhood astray. 3 weeks after the ruling, I finally returned full focus to the cabin. I finished framing the windows, hung the last pieces of siding, installed the solar inverter. The wraparound deck, my favorite part, was nearly complete. It faced the river, stretching wide and steady like a quiet promise. Every evening, I stood on that deck with a drink, watching sunlight skim the water. Not once did an HOA member step foot on the bank. Not once did I find a fake notice taped to my generator. Not once did headlights flash on my camera at 2 a.m. The silence wasn't empty. It was earned. Then came the letter. A simple envelope, delivered by regular mail. The return address listed as Maple Ridge Homeowners Association, Interim Board. Inside was a typed apology, signed by every board member except one. "We acknowledge Maple Ridge HOA had no legal jurisdiction over your riverfront property, and that past actions taken by our former president violated both law and neighborly respect. We extend our apologies and commit to ensuring no resident or board member interferes with your land or access rights ever again." Underneath the signatures was a handwritten note. "We should have known sooner. We won't make that mistake again." I folded the letter carefully and set it inside the leather folder next to all the documents that started this war. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Rights matter. Truth matters. And land, especially land passed down through generations, remembers who it belongs to. Spring came early that year. The river swelled, thick with snowmelt but calm in its own unstoppable way. I planted a boundary marker made of cedar at the edge of my property. Not an aggressive warning, just a fact. Private land, Carter Riverfront. Neighbors respected it. Everyone respected it. Bethany didn't return to Maple Ridge. Word was she'd moved to another county, somewhere far enough that she wouldn't have to face people who witnessed her downfall firsthand. The restraining order remained in effect, though I doubted she'd test it. Some endings don't need confrontation. Sometimes absence is closure. The cabin was finished by early summer. I stood on the deck the day I drove the final nail, the river curling around the bend like a silver ribbon. The wind carried the soft creak of pine. No sirens, no shouting, no HOA officials walking down the path with cameras or clipboards. Just peace, hard-earned peace. As I leaned on the railing, I thought back to the first morning Bethany arrived, storming toward me with fake authority and real confidence. I remembered the 911 calls, the false maps, the trespassing, the SUV stuck in the ditch, the courtroom gavel striking the final truth. All of it. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger, just clarity. In the West, land isn't just soil, it's legacy, responsibility, proof of what a family fought for, protected, and passed on. And no HOA, no president, no false paperwork can rewrite that. I took in the river, steady and ancient, flowing the same path it had long before Maple Ridge existed, and long after. This river, I said quietly, is exactly where it belongs. And so was I. If you've ever had to stand your ground against folks who overstepped, drop a simple yes in the comments so I know I'm not the only one. Justice only works when we refuse to back down. And if you want more stories about land, grit, and doing what's right, go on and subscribe. I'll be right here on the river for the next one.